Hey, good morning everybody. Welcome to the Sport and Recreation Committee meeting of the 20th of November. Just a few things there. We've got just a few apologies there. We've got apologies from Councillor Delberg, the Chair, Madam Mayor, maybe lateness for Councillor Walker. Got any other apologies? Thank you. Can I have someone put that? Can I have someone second that? Thank you, Councillor Barker. I'll put that. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Carried. Confirmation of order of business is as in the reports. There's a number of items there to go through. And I'll just, as usual, updating the interest register. Has anyone got any interests or conflicts for today's meeting? If you have, comes up during the meeting, please jump in and pop your hand up for those. Thank you. Public forum, we haven't got anything public forum, which is a change. Often we have a few there. I've got confirmation of minutes, so pages 6 and 9. 629.
I'll have to move, Mr. Chairman, maybe second it, but I know I'm very quiet. That's actually meetings, but I was present at the last meeting.
Okay, we got a, does that come out as...
Second something in the meeting.
Okay, have we got there in minutes here as a...
Missed. Inconspicuous.
True. Okay, no, very good. So if we can make a note of that.
Got 10 minutes to be amended, please.
Very good. Thank you. Any other?
Just move that,
Okay, thank you. Thanks for moving that. So I move that these are a true and correct record. Thank you. Another seconder. Councillor Barker, seconder. I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? Carried. I've got the, there is a chairman's report there. If you haven't, it's just been tabled this morning. I'll give you a chance to have a read through that. But I'll probably eat my hat in the first paragraph there. I mean, as you see, a bit of a countdown now to Christmas. You can less than 5 weeks. The kids are a bit excited. Probably parents aren't quite so excited, but it's not all batten down the hatches. I see people boasting about the snapper catches already in the Nelson region, and we've got the sort of first signs of the buskers and the tourists coming in, and there's a bit of a vibrancy, and it's always fine after spring and summer kicks in. There's a real positivity in the region, and the arts and social sporting events are kicking off, and the barbecue comes out, and I found mowing the lawn, I've had to suddenly start putting the suntan lotion on. So meteorologically, it's not Christmas till the 1st of December. I'm always impressed with the Mayor fighting a good fight to win the most sunshine hours. I think we can add to that and claim Nelson starts summer earlier than everyone else. But the very moment I finished penning that, it hailed. It hailed. So starting from now, maybe it's summer. But there's been a number of things happening, and I know the councillors around this table are involved in various activities, recreation and sport, and whether the kids or grandkids or themselves. And it's good to see what's happening. Reclassification of our reserves at Brook. Many were keen. We had the public hearing on that just a few weeks ago, and that comes down to on the 23rd of October that was, but came up next Tuesday is the recommendation, or deliberations I should say. Now those deliberations will go to full council for consideration. A good chance to debate those out. And some good news there. I saw the Trafalgar Centre was named finalist in the year's Entertainment Venues Association as for venue awards for Medium Venue of the Year. And I know there's nearly 100 venues on their books for that association. And so I thought they'd done extremely well. And that's against Te Rauparaha Arena, which is a great facility in Porirua. So that's really raised the game there, and I think it reflects a lot of the work that's been done over the year, especially since we've opened up the Trafalgar Centre and as we've adapted to the needs of the community and users. And you also would have seen a few weeks back the capacity of a Trafalgar Centre has increased markedly, and it's not because we've increased the size of the building as such, but it's more through the certification of how many people you can have seated or standing in the building, and that's in consideration of ease of access, safety, exits, etc. in the building. So that's meant a number of events where we haven't quite had the capacity in the past. With this increased capacity opens up a lot more clients, or definitely some more interest there, and there's been a good turnout for that. Installation of a new lowering truss system. That was where you can hang the lights, etc., and curtains that come up and down, so improve the speed and safety of that. That's been working extremely well. And we've got Maxwood Manufacturing have installed or replaced the old seating, which took a bit of a time. I think it took about half an hour to be set up, and that sped the process of that far quicker. So the turnover is far more succinct. You can see the Corefront Expo was on 25th and 26th, and then the very next day we were able to turn the whole thing around for the Kapahaka, which was a great event. Had a look in there, had a little glimpse in there, and the acoustics, especially the curtains put around, the acoustics were brilliant. So I spoke to the sound engineer there, and I said, well, how does this compare to the past? And he said, yeah, vast improvement. And there was a big grin on his face. And you might have seen some photos. There's a website there, Trafalgar Venues, which shows you some of the pictures of some of the setups. And I didn't go to that one, but I had a look in the pictures on there with the Nelson Chamber Commerce Awards, and it looked amazing, I thought, especially for lighting and the decor. And we've got some, those young and old, we've got some bands coming up, which we haven't had much in the past. Is Blind Spot, Devil Skin. To be honest, I don't know who they are, but I do know the rest. Trinity Roots, Brian Adams, Dave Dobbin, Jordan Luck from the Exponents are coming to town. So that's both Trafalgar Centre and Trafalgar Park. The Hollies, I'm not so familiar with. But yeah, I know it's been in the media and around the council table with the Bay Dreams, but I thought it proper to raise that. We've got the Bay Dreams coming up, and you know it's a big sell-out, 20,000 tickets. And there's two sides of the coin there. It's an event I think is a great coup for Nelson, and it's a sort of event that Nelson people have been crying out for a long time. I think the last time it was a big event, I think it was Tina Turner back in the 80s. But this is a huge event. But it's utilising our whole venues in that region. We've got the Trafalgar Centre and the Trafalgar Park. Trafalgar Centre for, I think it's a pre-party, and you've got Rutherford Park for some of the camping, and also Saxon Field for some of the events and accommodation. So some of these are still subject to final consents and permissions being achieved. But with the organisation behind that, who have successfully run the Mount Maunganui Bay Dreams for the past 3 years, I've found them they've been very competent and confident in what they're doing, and quite prudent in their processes. So I get a lot of confidence from that. But saying that, there's still a lot to take in mind with the infrastructure, parking, transport, etc. for Nelson region. So I'm hoping, and the community have got behind this, but I'm hoping the community will embrace this event, because if this is done well, and I have every confidence it will be done well, it will raise the flag and raise us on the map for centrally in the country for more of these such events, and that we can only get sharper in honing our skills, putting on and hosting such events. As far as sporting wise, the Marcos did well. I think they got some calls that went against them in the semi-finals, but they got a great support from the community at the Marcos events of recent, the Mitre 10 Cup, and that's been quickly turned around for now for the summer football, with the National League competition playing on the same grounds. And as far as achievements for some of our local youngsters, I see Callan Elliott, a 19-year-old keen footballer here. Has been going up the ranks, and he got a signed contract, one of the youngest in the squad for our Wellington Phoenix Professional A-League. So a big grin on his face and family, so well done, he's a good player, I've seen him play. And then also what I've seen play is 16-year-old Amelia got named for the New Zealand football team, and that was timely. We got the World Cup in Uruguay at the moment, and she's a very good player. She's only 16, and they just played just a couple of days ago Uruguay, the hosting nation, and you know Uruguay love their football, and the New Zealand team beat them 2-1. In fact, they beat Finland 1-0 and have gone around to the next round. They're playing Ghana, which is playing today, so I'll be keen to see how that goes. Also, another local community involvement was the Victory Boxing, which I know they've presented here. Paul Hammond with their organisation, and the council support that where they can, but they had a father and son event, and that was great, and that was attended also by some All Blacks, Marco players, etc., and Crusader players, training with young fellas, and you see the grins on their faces, and actually bigger grins on the dads that came along and saw who these guys were. But when the kids saw these guys come through the doorway, there was huge grins. But I've personally seen a couple of young fellas I know, their confidence and esteem has risen greatly, just been involved in that training, that boxing training, and the support they've got there. But that kid's usually fairly shy and lack a bit of confidence here, and it's gone a huge way to improve their self-esteem, and they always have big grins on their faces, but extremely well run and a good group of volunteers which make that happen. And another thing coming up this Friday is the Sports Tasman Nelson Awards, and it's a great event. I've been to the last 4 or 5 of those, and it's a chance to recognise the outstanding performances, not just of our sporting people, young and old, but also those volunteers and coaches that make these events and clubs happen. But they've also got Wyatt Creek. He's going to be the guest speaker at this event, and he'll be definitely worth listening to. And didn't realise at the time, but he's the most capped player in history of Super Rugby. But I see there's just a few more tickets on the website for that, so if you're interested in going along, grab those as soon as you can. But I'll wrap up on that. Any comments from the floor? Thank you, Councillor Courtney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your very full report. Mr. Chair, I know you'll want me at this moment, take this moment to mention amongst the roses that the M&Ms, Mel and Marie, and also Her Worship the Mayor and her mother attended on Sunday.
Very good.
We witnessed there community at its best.
Yep.
It was a fantastic event, starting at 1 o'clock. Hundreds of people there, well organised, and this committee needs to relay its thanks to people like Peter Grundy, who steered that event to some degree with the state of the rose beds and the roses that were displayed there. It was the 50th anniversary of Rosedale, it was originally called, and now it's called Amongst the Roses, but it's the 50th anniversary this year, and they really put themselves out, and it looked an absolute picture. The Samuel's Rose Gardens, and Kate Krawczyk is her name. She is a contractor, Kate Krawczyk. She is a contractor with Nelmac, and she led her team, and you could just see in what was presented there the degree of love and care that had gone into getting it to the standard that it was on Sunday. It was a special day for me too, because I was there supporting my friend, Brian Samuels, whose mum and dad were being remembered, because it was Jim and Rima Samuels that donated the 3,500 roses originally when they sold their land to the Nelson City Council for a road to go through. We now call it the proposal of the Southern Link, way back in 1968. And and they helped the council. They donated that to the council, and the rose gardens were formed there at Broad Green, adjacent to Broad Green House. And they tended those roses for many years after they gifted them. So it was a special day for the Samuels family, and I was there to be proud to be there with my friend when his mum and dad were remembered. They unveiled, Her Worship the Mayor unveiled a information board, and the original stone was replaced, put back there, that was placed in the garden when they were opened back in 50 years ago. So it was a lovely day. There's lots of thanks that has to go out to people. There were there was pipe bands, there was vintage cars.
This is the weekend just gone.
Oh yes, it was a fantastic event. Vintage cars, everyone was participating. There was a youth band from the Nelson Centre for Musical Arts there as well, and just so many to mention, but it was a wonderful, wonderful day, and it warmed your heart to be there and to experience it. So I wanted to report to you particularly about the state of those roses and how Peter Grundy primarily led a team, a contract team from Nelmac, headed by Kate Krawczyk, I believe her name is, and her team. They're just so committed, and it was fantastic.
No, thank you for that, because and no, definitely good point with the staff of Parks and Reserves work very hard, especially this time of year. You've got the grass growing, the trees are sprouting, things need to be pruned, everything made to look as it should, and while we can, it's often difficult to get the mowing done and the pruning done when it suddenly downpours of rain and frost. and sunshine, four seasons in one day, but it's a very busy time, so that's great, and the community get behind that and see the threats of the labour. I just one quick comment there. Councillor Noonan raised a good point, the importance of her committee and my committee, and we work very closely together, and with Roger, but it's also worth raising a lot of the topics, some of the topics I've raised in the Chairman's report. There can be an overlap between community services and the good work that committee does. So she raised, and which we have been doing extremely well, I felt, is just make sure there's good close coordination with potential projects and current projects, and same around the table if there's things, even there's a crossover and you think it may have been missed or overseen in one committee and not the other, please raise that. But that was a good point you raised there, Councillor Courtney. So I'll get someone's able to move that receive the Chairman's report. Oh, sorry, Councillor Barker, on a list of comments.
Move it, Mr. Chairman, but I want to take the opportunity to thank you for a comprehensive, informative report covering a whole lot of things. I'm interested in the Trafalgar Centre's performance, which when we get into your quarterly report, we'll see some more details of. But yeah, I know that we had some concerns about what the limitation on the number of people in there was a few months back. And you've got the figures there, what it is now.
Yep.
Entitled to have legally in there.
Correct.
I would like to know just, and I can catch up later, I think, what it was, what it used to be, and what it was and what it is now, and just see how we're going. Because it's important that we get as good a crowd in there as we can, and we have visiting artists who are really good. If we can get the maximum safely in there, all the better. And the other thing I wanted to mention was Wyatt Crockett, you mentioned him. Yeah, a local chap, most cap player. A really good guy. I bought his book the other day. Got him to sign it for me because I'm really impressed with someone who just sticks at the game like he did. And against the best in the world, he was as good as the best. And he's now got a shop in Nelson's main street. So I think that's great that he's come back to Nelson, and we can be proud of him as a Nelson boy. Went to the college here and has really performed well.
No, he's a very humble chap, and a good chap. In fact, his speaking fee, he's giving it to charity. Towards Refuge, I believe.
So it's great that he's
embracing the community,
staying into Nelson and having that shop. I hope the community supports Stirling Sports in Trafalgar Street because of Wyatt.
No, definitely. If you get a chance to go along to that sports awards night, it's a great meal and some great speakers and some great people there. No, thank you for that. Can I have someone move? Would you like to move? Thank you, Councillor Barker, and I'll Councillor Courtney second that. I'll put the motion to receive the Chairman's report. Aye. Those in favour, aye. Those against, carried. That leads to our first of the agenda, which is in the Marsden Valley Reserve and the options to manage wild deer populations. I've got some staff present that, so pages 10 to 27. Thank you, Gary and Rosie. Are there any changes, corrections to what we have in the report in front of us?
Good morning. No, through the chair, not that we're aware of. The report's as is. I'll just give a little quick intro, and I think it's very much summed up point 7 under options. But just as a quick summary, the Parks Department would, as normal practice, undertake culling under the Wild Animal Act and have done so in the past. This is a different case, and the reason that we're bringing it to committee is that there was a petition from local residents asking that a cull of these wild animals hasn't taken place, so hence the report coming to you today.
But in there, the petition, I believe, is in our report included in there, so Councillor, if you haven't already read that, if you want to just get a bit of background on the petition and some of those who've put a statement there, by all means, that's here for looking through. But that was a few months back when that was originally brought to us, I believe, so it was good that we've reinserted that in the report for a refresher. Thank you.
Great. So it really, in summary of the report, it really is those options and asking committee for direction on the options, which is to do nothing, which is what the petition is requesting, that the deer are allowed to remain there. There's some sort of quite strong environmental considerations around that, around the sustainability of keeping a wild deer population in residential areas, and that the main issue is vegetation loss, so the deer are eating vegetation on private property, including reserve and the cemetery. There's also another side issue of the deer going on the road, so some traffic safety issues along there. The other option is to cull the deer on both council land and private property. The private property would need to be permission given from the property owners, but under the Wildlife Act it allows that. And lastly, just to cull the deer on council-only land. So they're the options that we're sort of presenting to manage this issue.
Thank you. Any comments? Councillor Barker?
Yeah, several questions, Mr Chairman. The recommendation there is that the council confirms the practice of culling deer within the Marsden Valley Reserve should continue. My question in my mind is, it's obviously not been successful in keeping the deer population down. Why do you continue the current practice which is not working? So I've got a few questions. How the proposed cull, who would do it and how would it take place? And I'm thinking in terms of what happened with the goat population, which we went in and did cull, I understand. So around that cull, I need to know a little bit more. Why isn't it working, and what will be done different now that would actually reduce the number of these noxious animals? And the other question I have is in section 5.3 of the report. Nelson Nature has recently run a contract for animal control work in the Maitai and Roding water reserves. Who is Nelson Nature? Is it a legal entity or is it a group that we manage? So I just need a little bit about that, and would they be the people that would be contracted to do a cull if we decided to do a cull?
Do you want to answer or do you want me to answer?
Through the chair, the first question is around about the why we haven't managed the deer population. It was probably back in about in 2017. A lot of the deer may have come off a private property at that point. And the environmental inspection team went to address the problem at that point, but the deer, being transient, probably took off back up into the high country where there's more feed up there, and then through the period they've come back down again. So they are reasonably transient and they come back down. So it's pretty hard to sort of corral them and get hold of them, but otherwise most of them are actually in a residential area, which is actually quite difficult to maintain them through there.
Through the chair, that's our environmental science team, and that's a brand that they operate under, Nelson Nature. So Joe Martin's team.
And what have they been doing now? What have they been doing in animal control work, which you say in the report that they are doing?
So they've just tendered and managed a contract for goat culling up in the Maitai area.
Mm-hmm. Right. And is it expected that they would be the people that would get into the culling work for the deer in Marsden Valley?
Not necessarily. We'd go through a tender process for the work. So we'd put out to the market for some qualified professional culling teams to go on and do this work.
I haven't got a picture in my mind of what Nelson Nature is yet. Is it a legal entity? Is it a... And it takes on contracts?
I think Nelson Nature is our vision and our organisation, but Nelson Nature is saying Nelson Nature and our umbrella of a contract is seeking a tender, or tendering out, seeking someone who can come to us and do the job of culling the deer. And in the past, that's what we've done with the Maitai. I'll probably come to that in a moment.
I think I might be getting a picture. They don't actually do it. They run the contract to get it done.
Yeah.
Right.
Council program.
Yeah.
Use that brand, Nelson.
Reading it,
Yeah, I was trying to work out that.
You seem representing some of our scientists out there. It wouldn't go well.
Yeah. I've got Councillor Courtney and Councillor McGee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Officer Rosie. Have you considered involving the community in this? And by that I mean there is a desire out there amongst local trained hunters to be given the opportunity.
Through the chair, I spoke to the New Zealand Deerstalk Association yesterday, and their interest is really is in the upper country, where they can do most of their hunting. They didn't really have an interest around this area, the residential area.
Councillor McGurk.
Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think that was one of the questions was, what's the relationship like with the Deerstalkers Association? I know Bill O'Leary lives out that way.
Well, through the chair, it was probably the first time we probably met them was yesterday, and I thought that meeting went very well, actually, and they went away positive.
Okay, on to some other questions. Do we know what species of deer they are?
Fellow? Red deer?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, my understanding, a lot of them are fallow.
Oh, right,
Reindeer.
Thing I just want to raise, I know I've asked this of staff, I had some concerns initially, but I've had a chance to answer this here, was we've had a lot of feedback from the Maitai culling process, and there was disappointment from public, and understand disappointment from public that it didn't go out, seemingly didn't go out for public tender, and a lot of good people who already hunt in the area, the Maitai for example, and would have loved the opportunity to cull that and then save us the bill, the council bill, and they felt that would be the game food was very much sought after for people, and they would have donated that back or used it themselves. So I know there was a disappointment, both hunters and non-hunters, and that's come through, and I was concerned that would come through also for this particular area in Marsden. In a similar situation, we've got areas in the back hills there which traditionally and still are hunted by some very capable people who've been doing it a long time over generations. So I know I've raised this to you recently in the past. What's different about this situation, and can we do anything to give it opportunity for those people who are skilled out there to put their hand up?
Through the chair, in response to that, I think we need to be very aware that this is, as Gary said, very much front country, coming right down into residential areas. There's a lot of mountain biking tracks in there. So we would open up that tender process and people can tender for that, but something we'd be very, very mindful of is health and safety and how they would be managing that public interface in terms of safety. It's it is a high risk activity. So in terms of that tender, we'd be very, very aware of public safety and how the contractor would be managing that.
Thank you. I see we've got very helpful put in that. I see we're very helpful on page 27. Councillors may want to have a look at that, to get your head around that. We've got a map on page 27 which is showing Gary, and I'll get you, Rosie and Gary, even just to sort of clarify that. And once again, I'm sort of thinking the comparison of the Maitai, and there's a bit of residential up there, but some Maitai, it's sort of more of a wilderness, can be further up back. And this area, you've got the deer. I know the deer in the past have been coming into some of the subdivisions, etc., but we have got some area behind. So anything on that map, can you point out the difference between what was happening here and the Maitai?
Through the chair, the difference here is that the deer come down into, you probably see on the left-hand side, to Solitaire Investments, which is a subdivision,
Yep.
which is predominantly a residential site.
Okay.
It also comes down the right-hand side of that through the private properties, and then that's where it crosses the road. Does that answer any questions?
It does, thank you. And I'll just quickly, I know I've got a couple of questions there. I know up the brook, we get deer and we get pigs.
Yep.
Even goats in the past. The Maitai, you get your deer, goats. There's even a famous half marathon run there is named after the wild boar from a time when one of the runners was actually chased by a boar, and then a local hunter there grabbed it, and that's now become the trophy to win and not be caught by the boar running up the valley. But no, that's all part of the good side. I think some good side of the community. You've got some of these animals come through and the people enjoy that, but I know it also causes some issues, like Attawai, we've had issues with the goats, etc. So there's a bit of give and take, I would have thought. But in this situation, it's causing more than a bit of grief, is that correct? And B, you're concerned that the operation of culling isn't going to be just going up in the back hills, it's going to be culling on private land and cemetery and residential.
Potentially.
Yeah, through the chair, potentially that will be the case.
Okay. And I've got a couple of questions there. Do I have Councillor McGurk?
Just following on. Have you had the discussion, what the discussion's been like with Solitaire Investments? They're probably the principal landowner in there with much the vacant land?
Yeah, through the chair, I have spoken to Solitaire Investments. Initially, they weren't keen for us to go onto the land because they're probably saying that the problem exists coming down from the Marsden Valley Reserve onto their subdivision, but they were quite supportive of the approach we were going to take if we were to cull the deer out, because it is a huge issue for them, because they're losing a lot of vegetation through their subdivision.
Yep. And a subsequent question, you talked about the Wild Animal Control Act. That really talks about wild and feral animals. When does that take place? Because there was some suggestion these are escaped farm deer, so which generally is outside the scope of that act.
Through the chair, they, whether they're escaped or not, they aren't tagged and they are considered to be wild.
Right, fine.
Councillor Courtney, Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Through to Gary. Have you met with any of these, or a group or a group representing the petitioners, 109 signatures here? Have you had a meeting with them? You say you've met with Solitaire, have you? You've met with them?
Through the chair, I've only spoken to them on the phone. I have not met with any of the members of the petition, but I have sent the members of the petition the report.
You met with Solitaire, did you?
I spoke to them on the phone, yes.
You spoke to them on the phone? Righto. And what do you think of their thinking around signage for drivers from a health and safety perspective? Are you considering that at all, a sign along?
Through the chair, I wouldn't consider signage because I'd consider the initial problem is the deer to be removed.
And how often have you done this in the past? When was the last time you did the culling?
Through chair, I have never done the culling in this area.
You haven't done it before? No. Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Barker, are we on the list?
Yeah, I'm coming back to this point that we say that the recommendation is that we confirm the practice of culling deer within the reserve should continue, so we actually haven't. I know that our waterworks people used to kill the wild pigs, and I presume they've probably got a few deer. But to my knowledge, we haven't had a practice of culling the deer. It's one of the options, looking at how deer are controlled in other parts of the South Island and the country for that matter. Would a helicopter project get in and herd them in and do the whole job very quickly and efficiently? Would that be one of the options that would be looked at? Helicopter hunting seems to be the way to get deer.
As we say, the FES came through the tender process. I'm not familiar with the helicopter practice.
I mean, that DOC uses them for tar, and they've been used for deer. They seem to be the most successful way of doing it, so I just would suggest that that be one of the options anyway.
That may, correct me not, that may come up in the tender process that...
You through chair, that's correct.
Mr Chair, I just move the recommendation.
One more question, so we'll just make sure we've got this completely clear, because this is a decision we'll have from both sides of the coin. From the public will react, and want to make sure that we're fully informed and public are fully informed, and the reasons for us to go ahead with this. We've got this petition here saying that a number of people in the region, in the area, are quite happy to live alongside the deer, etc. So how's it become more a problem? We've got it because it's I know in the past, and that part of that was we had an issue with people, cowboys you could say, coming up and having a few pot shots from the residential area, which is an activity we don't want happening. I'm not sure if that's continued or not. And B, we're saying it's causing a lot of damage to council property and private property. Is this really the crux of the situation?
Yeah, through the chair, that is the main concern is the vegetation damage they do, and also the danger on the road.
Okay. And has the steer population just sort of as all of a sudden become an issue, or has it always been an issue and we've just lived with it, or is it because we've expanded the subdivisions and we've got the two areas encroaching?
No, through the chair, it's only become an issue in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of deer. But to be fair, at the moment, I don't know if there's been any deer sightings recently. They may have gone back up into the country, but when the feed gets short, they will certainly come back down again. So,
and I'll just get also just a comment on the situation. We've got the brook, the Maitai and the Marsden, and they're also taken care of differently or similarly. both those areas of wildlands reserves overlap. So it's only a quick hop from the Maitai to the Brook to the Marsden. So the animals, the deer, the goats, the pigs, they traverse across each. So what you're saying, if we don't do this in a concerted effort, it could be more of an issue. That if we leave one area, one valley, it's just going to cause trouble and problems or benefits in other valleys. Have I got that correct?
Yeah, through the chair, that's probably correct, but also you could keep in mind the Nelson Age contract's over 3 years, so they'll be addressing the area in the top country
And
across the 3 reserves.
I know I've taken a bit of time here questioning, but I just want to make sure this is completely clear to the public and us around the table. Culling, as is in culling, we're just culling the numbers back rather than eradicating. And this is something would need to be on an annual or repetitive process to keep the numbers down, if I've got that right.
Yeah, that's correct.
And just and one last one, as far as the tender process, because we got criticised heavily for Maitai culling. So this is, as you've stated, will be out to the public, publicly advertised. So public or professionals can come forward and put their tender in, and then it's weighed up by our staff in regards to how it fits desired need outcome.
Through the chair, that's correct. Yep.
Thank you. Any last? Councillor Fulton. Councillor Courtney.
Thank you, through the chair. I just have a question around what kind of population are we talking about? I notice in the report it says that there were 41 deer removed. Is it a similar population to that, or is it hundreds or less? Or any idea?
Through the chair, the last sightings, they reckon there were probably about 40 plus.
40 plus?
Yep.
So it's a significant population then?
Yes, it is.
And you'll be trying to take that population down to sort of 50 to 10% of that or 5% of that?
We'd have to ascertain that through the tender process as well. I'm not sure exactly if we want to, otherwise be full eradication.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Courtney.
Through you to Gary, has this been budgeted for, or is this unbudgeted expenditure?
It's within operating budgets. It's covered within the conservation operational budgets.
Fine, so you had some idea earlier that you could foresee this necessary, this action?
We always have an element of reactionary budgets within those conservation reserves, through the chair.
Thank you. So we've had this moved and seconded. Before I move into debate, Councillor Barker.
Speaking to the motion.
Okay, moving to debate. Thank you.
This is an area that I know quite well and used to spend a lot more time, not so much now, in that area. And really, did I ever see any evidence of deer in the past? So to me, this seems like it's a fairly new phenomenon, this number anyway. And
Thank you.
I'm really having difficulty understanding why so many residents have put their names to this petition and why they have. If they acknowledge the damage that these deer are doing to our native bush and potentially to their own property, I'm sort of perplexed as to why they've come in such a large number saying leave these deer here. It just doesn't make sense to me, and the report doesn't tell me why they feel so strongly about it that they put their names to this. I just can't appreciate why they're doing this, because to me it doesn't make sense. The report clearly outlines the damage that is done and the potential damage to our native bush regeneration, and I'm perplexed. So I'm going to vote for it to happen, but I would like to know why these people feel so strongly that they put their names to their signatures to the petition in such a large number. All those subdivisions seem to be represented in the people that are there, and yeah, I'm at a loss. And in making the decision, you know, I just feel a little uncomfortable making the decision without really understanding what we've got in front of us.
Thank you, Councillor Barker. Councillor Fulton, Councillor McGurk.
Look, I did have a subsequent question, but I can bring it up during my debate if you'd prefer. So I'm going to support the recommendation. I do have some concerns around the petition we've received, and I just wonder if it's possible as part of that tender process in terms of that deer cull, whether we could consider sort of a sustainable management, possibly looking at what the current percentage is and what percentage we need to get it, what numbers we need to get it down to, and whether there could be consideration of the use of the cull deer. I don't know if venison is an option or not, but it might be that we could be looking into the future. It might be that there has to be a fairly large cull at this point in time, but into the future it could be sort of a sustainable practice and ongoing practice, which might allow the residents to support that process, a little bit like wild sea fishing, really. It would be nice to think that we could get that balance right. I know that's quite important with the tahr population down south, so I think the reasons for needing the cull are very important in terms of protecting our native species, and they're sort of allowing for that biodiversity, and we don't want the numbers to get to such a level that they're out of control, but certainly perhaps looking at a small management plan for future years, how we're going to manage this issue is probably quite important. As we take these initiatives, I think it's important we consider long-term how we keep the population at a low enough level to allow for those trees and seedlings to grow, but also how we take our community with us through.
Thank you, Councillor Horton. I take your point in regards to the ongoing culling and be a sustainable way and include the community in going forward on that. But are you speaking in support or against?
Yes, I'm speaking in support and I seconded it, but I guess I just think that, is it appropriate to use the meat for, can that be part of the conversation in terms of your tender process? And I would like to think that we can...
and that's noted.
Can look at it as a sustainable kind of farming model a little bit as well.
Sorry, I had someone else, Councillor Courtney, was that right? And then I've got Councillor McGurk. And I haven't got Jacob and Latai. By all means, pop your hand up and feel free to interject. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This wouldn't normally come before us, I don't feel, but because of the circumstances and probably the petition, it has, if I understand that correctly. And I'm very much in Councillor Barker's court on this one. I sort of feel that we're lacking the knowledge. I would have liked to have heard from our officers that they did speak with a delegation representative of those who've signed the petition to get an understanding, as Councillor Barker said, of their concerns. The fact that 109 people have signed the petition, I really do want to know more, and it would have been helpful, as Councillor Barker said, to know that prior to making our decision, and in the future we should make it part of the process that petitioners are spoken to and understood before we make these kinds of decisions.
Thank you, Councillor Courtney. Councillor McGurk, was that right?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you. I'm speaking strongly in support of this recommendation. And I do so for a number of reasons, is that I think we've first got to recognise that we have a problem up there, we have a deer population, and they are an introduced pest, and I've used the term before, they're nothing more than possums on stilts. I'll use that phrase again. They are an introduced pest, and they are doing significant ecological damage to the lowland environment, particularly in lowland indigenous environment. They also represent quite a significant traffic hazard, and there are other issues like they are a disease vector, things like TB. So it is a significant problem, and it's easy to get caught up in the emotion and the operational details. So the consequences of not dealing with deer population are significant, is that it's going to have the loss of the diversity, and I think if it's left unchecked, we are going to have, they will represent a significant hazard to the people up there. The proposed solution is that a controlled deer cull seeking a professional contract for services, and I think that's entirely appropriate. One of the lessons we learned early on with the Nelson Nature was with the animal control of wild goats up in the Dun Mountain was that it was left to a pretty casual sort of group up there. Oh, you go and control the goats. Well, it never happened. The problem just got worse and didn't go away. we are paying good money for a contract for professional services, controlled deer population that needs to be carried out, particularly in this particular area, in a suburban environment on the edge of urban area, and well used by recreational. It is not the time for cowboys and well-meaning amateurs. This is, we need professional, qualified and experienced people to do animal control work. And I think it's appropriate that we put the job out for tender, see who we get with some clear scope and outcomes we're wanting. So for those reasons, I am in total support of the recommendation and urge the committee to support it.
Thank you, Councillor McGurk. I'll just a few comments there. This one I know is a sensitive topic, and I've gone some great length to get some of the questions answered, and the staff have answered them very well. Hunting is very much part of the Nelson and Kiwi culture, and it's been appreciated, I know, up the Brook and up the Maitai valleys, and the deer and pig and goats are all part of the flora and fauna in the region, and generally in the past they've kept at bay with the hunting, etc. And I know in the even the Maitai and the Brook, and as outlined in the petition in the Marsden Valley, generally a number of the locals very much enjoy that interaction, and then the pigs come and dig up your radishes every now and then, and I know being at the Brook camp you'll see the odd deer run across there. It's quite an incredible sight to see, to be so close to the CBD and so close to nature. And I've seen in Mongatapu, the rainforest up there is beautiful, and I know there's deer up there you come across, pigs and goat, and then you also have the same at Maitai, and I imagine up the Marsden and definitely up the Brook. There obviously comes a time when you need to cull them back. This is where we are at the moment, and I'm also concerned that, especially in Marsden, it's become more of a safety issue. So my weighing up, it hasn't been an easy decision. We've got the developments happening up there, and the concerns a little way back, where you might recall we did have some submitters come to the table, might actually be emailed to us, and they're concerned that the cowboys going up there shooting literally from the reserves, from the roads, and that hasn't happened in the past, but that's not a practice that we want to see happen or encouraged, and I think that was pretty much sorted out with police, etc., and there are some concerns of that. But I'm also, like I said before, it's all part of the Kiwi culture, and being able to get the wild foods of the pig, the deer, etc., but it needs to be in a controlled manner. So I'm going to support what we have in front of us, but I am taking very much seriously the points that Councillor Fulton and Councillor Parker raised in regards to ongoing and sustainable way of doing it, and as assured by the staff, this is going to go out to public for tenders. So I want to ensure that those who are qualified or experienced or would like to put their hand up, because a lot of people put their hand up, but we can very generally see those who've got a serious interest in that culling can put their hand up, and I ask that the staff consider all those genuine offers and tenders. Obviously there's a few processes and consents and safety issues that have to be ticked, boxes have to be ticked for that. But I'll put that. Sorry? Yeah, we had we've moved and seconded. I'll put that. Those in favour? Those against? Thank you. Carried. Thanks for that, councillors, and thank you, staff. Because some of those topics, it's not as easy, straightforward as it can on paper seem. That takes us to the next on our agenda, which is we've got the quarterly report, which is pages 28 to 49. And I found this is a bit new. I found this extremely helpful. I know in the last few years it was good to try and get an update on specifically for our committee, and often our financing is taking a council in a whole, but this is a chance to break it right down so we can see in a running progress how this committee is doing and achieving its goals and spending and savings, etc. But do I have a staff presenting that? Thank you, Rosie. So we've got here the purpose of this report, councillors, is to inform members of our committee the progress and financial results activities that have been delegated and highlight any variations. Thank you.
And through the chair, I did just want to bring to everyone's attention an error on page 33 under 5.16. unfortunately, we just got our attachments round the wrong way. It should be attachment 1. So that's the projects rather than the attachment 2.
Thank you.
But we're just happy to take questions on this, if there's any specific detail or questions relating to any of the topics outlined.
Any questions, councillor Barker?
Couple of questions on the commentary part of the report. And 4.1, the Stoke Youth Park. I'm just wondering, can you just outline a little bit, enlighten me a little bit more on this first stage of investigation which has been completed? Who did it and how did they do it?
Mr Chair, Councillor Barker, the initial study was done by Chris Ward and his consultancy, and he did it by looking at all the background that we currently have and going out into the community. I'll be bringing back, or we'll be bringing back to the committee the status of that recommendation and to get guidance from councillors where we go from here. We'll be doing that in the new year.
Thank you very much. That's useful to know. Second question is 4.10, the Great Taste Trail to Huna Beach to Airport section. Can you just outline and give me a bit more information about what's happening with the investigation into coastal erosion situation?
Yes, Councillor, we have two issues that we're currently working on at the moment, this week in fact. The first one is the route around Modeller's Pond, and we're meeting on site tomorrow to resolve that. The second issue relates to the proposed path alongside the camp, the Tahuna Beach camp. And we're looking at, should we be developing a path along there where it's inevitable that erosion is going to remove that portion of bank in the future. So we're looking at what's our investment, and we're looking at what's our liability if we put that pathway through there. So that's what we're working on at the moment.
So the park boundary that you're concerned about is not where the rock wall is?
Yes, along that rock wall.
Are you suggesting that that rock wall is failing?
No, but if you look at what are the trends of the movement of the Blind Channel, and in my time here, the channel has moved approximately 3.5 metres eastward per year, and it appears as though that will continue. So even though the rock wall is holding up well at the moment, we can't guarantee that beyond the next 10 years.
Yeah, I can confirm what you say about what has happened in the past, and the erosion has been dramatic with that channel movement. But the rock wall has been very successful since it was put in. It has stopped it. I know how many hectares of land were actually lost in the camp, which were very, very significant, and that rock wall has been successful. So I wouldn't like to think that we are going to be tentative about putting that trail in because we think maybe that rock wall will fail in the future. I'm confident that it would be there.
Councillor, we hope that you're correct, but we need to be diligent about this, and we need to investigate it before we recommend to council that we proceed.
Any other questions? Councillor Fulton, Courtney, McGurk.
Yes, thank you, through the chair. I have a couple of questions, about 4 questions. My first is around 4.8, the Rutherford Park Playground. I just wondered, can you just give us a little update on where that, I see that it's still in preliminary stages, but how's it going? We've been waiting a long time.
Councillors, it's very much in the preliminary stage, and what we're doing at the moment, just pulling some ideas together about opportunities and investigating what are external funding opportunities for us as well. As soon as we have completed a bit more of that work, we'll come back to committee.
And so when we workshopped it in the past, we were considering whether to sort of go for a more natural, lower budget playground or something higher end. Have you considered those options at all in any more depth?
We're looking at both of those options, but we're not at the stage where we've got anything firm to bring back to committee.
Have you got a timeline?
No, we don't. It will be in the new year.
Okay. Well, I look forward to seeing something. I think it would be good in the new year to at least maybe have a workshop. I wonder if we should be reaching out to the community and getting some feedback from them as to what they would like to see. We do have a site for that now. Yeah, so we have the site.
Yes, Councillor Fulton, yes, this year is very much an investigatory phase, and as we work through it, we'll keep councillors informed.
Okay, thank you. My other question is around Trafalgar Centre. We seem to have lots of little lines where it says that we've actually made more revenue than we expected. So I just wanted to say that's great. Is that what am I reading that correctly? That it's great news that they've got 55,000 extra in rent than budget than they were anticipating. So the Trafalgar Centre is obviously doing well in terms of usage at the moment. 5.2, page 30.
Through the chair, that's correct, but it is also counterbalanced with expenditure being ahead as well. So more people have come in, but it's cost more money to run it. So.
Okay.
And 5.10.
And 5.10. So yes, no, I mean, that makes sense, but basically what that's telling us is that the venue is being used more than we anticipated, which is great, because that's really what we want, is that this is an expensive venue and we'd like to be seeing it used and utilised as much as possible. It's absolutely fine that the revenue which is received would go back into improving the asset more, but I guess I just wanted to find out, is its use being there seems to be a lot of out-of-town events coming for January, lots of talk around Nelson about how many music events we've got coming, and there seems to be quite a buzz in the community, so it certainly seems to be delivering in ways that we had hoped it would. Is that the feeling of the, I've forgotten, CLIM down there? CLM? Yeah.
Yes, that's correct. We've got a meeting with them this afternoon, so we'll be getting more updated figures, but no, that's certainly the feeling and the impact we're getting back from patronage, so.
Great, so I think it's really important that we celebrate good news, because that venue was out of use for many years, and it's nice to see that it's already creating a bit of spark for Nelson over the summer. People are certainly commenting to me how many choices there are of different music options, and you know that there's so much happening in January and February.
Very good, and some of it was covered in the chairman's report.
Yeah.
Just highlighting.
Apologies.
It's just been tabled.
And then I know also 5.4 that the Brook Camp is ahead of budgeted revenue. So is that saying that again it's being utilised more than we'd anticipated?
Through the
rentals of sites exceeding budget. Is that correct?
Through the chair, that's correct.
Great. So that's fantastic news as well. And finally 4.11. Are you able to just give me a brief update on how we're going with the mountain bike hub? I know we workshopped it recently, but has there been any more progress with that? So 4.11, page 30.
Mr Chair, we're bringing a report back through the Governance Committee on 29th of November.
Okay, so that's coming up to us really soon. Fantastic, thank you.
And I missed Councillor McGurk and then Councillor Courtney, so I'll swap you around.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Chair. I've got probably questions in two areas. Others probably got others in other areas, but the two I want to talk about is the Totally Boating building and the reserve management plans. Just talk about the Totally Boating building at the moment. I see on paragraph 4.4 at page 29, also more importantly on page 41 of the status report, is that I'm sort of getting the impression that we're stuck with a building that we can't use, and perhaps we've paid and it's blown the budget out.
Mr Chair, councillors, we purchased the Totally Boating site primarily because of its land value. We're acutely short of space down there for parking, particularly boat trailers. So that was the prime reason why we purchased it. We felt that there was an opportunity that it could be incorporated into the water sports building, however. So we've included that in our investigation, but it's since proved that it really wouldn't work. The building is not structurally suitable to adapt to the layout that we wanted to create, and structurally it's not brilliant either. So the Totally building, the land will be valuable for boat parking in the future.
So in terms of the budget, are we looking at a carry forward or something in the annual plan?
Councillors, once we started working through with the community group, we have come up with two options. One of them is which better meets their needs, but the cost of that construction would be considerably more, such that we're going to have to come back through the annual plan process and put this option to you to see whether you're going to go down that line. The costing of that building could be up towards $4 million. Of that, 50% of it would be our cost. So it's significantly more, so we need a council to make a decision on that before we start looking at any design phase.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Petheram. And the other one is the delays with the reserves, reserve management plans and the Classification of the Reserves Act. This has been going on for a little while. Where are we at with that? Because I'm bearing in mind, I think in paragraph 5.5 to 5.9 talks about various reserves and estates around the city.
So through the chair, the reserve management plan we're working on at the moment is the reserve management plan for our sports grounds. In 2017, we classified Ngāwhatu, Botanics and Victory Square. Of the remaining sports grounds that need classification, there's only Green Meadows to go, and we'll be bringing a report to council shortly to complete that process.
Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. I thought it was Councillor Courtney then. Councillor Courtney?
Mr Chairman, through you to Andrew, I think. Andrew, the marina, is your budgeting this year allowing for any fencing around parking in the vicinity of the parking for marina users? There's a lot of discontent that the parking down there is not altogether used by just marina users. So there's a strong view that it should be fenced, gated and have a swipe system in place. Are you budgeting anywhere in the next 12 months for that?
Mr Chair, councillors, no, we're not at this stage. We have a list of projects that we're working on, and we're doing that through the Marina Advisory Group. We're aware of that issue, and we understand that something's going to have to be done about it in the future, but it's not one of our priority projects in the next 12 months.
Chair, through to Rosie, when you're meeting with CLM this afternoon, could you have an in-depth discussion with them or on the topic of leasing charges for community groups here in Nelson? That facility is a community facility paid for originally by fundraising in the 1970s by the community, and there is a view that there should be a reasonable rate for community activities born out of the community, you know, groups and so forth. And you're going to tell me that there is one already, but it's of not great significance. So can you, in your discussions, have a look at that with them?
Can I allow Mr Ball to firstly
thank you through the chair. As I understand it, we're referring, councillor, to Trafalgar Centre specifically? Yes. So, as it happens, I've just had a look myself just to see what the current rates are and what the community rates are for that facility. In doing that, I can see that they were set and approved by council in 2016. We brought up a fees and charges paper earlier this year through this committee. There was no change to the fees and charges for the Trafalgar Centre. There'll be another opportunity early next year. I would propose that we bring that forward to you then with options as required.
Thank you, Mr. Ball. It is a changing scene, and you've got to change as the community's view changes and demands change. And so, you know, I don't have any unease about raising it at this point, even though we may have approved then and before that again, because that concern is growing that the rate is not reasonable enough. And we want to lift our occupancy, and we're doing that, aren't we, which is great. We really do have to look at this.
Point taken, councillor Courtney, so that's opportunity for the next, have a look at those. Thank you. Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I just want to take the opportunity to say thanks to the Chief Exec and Roger and all the team for putting together this quarterly report, this first quarterly report with this committee, because it's very informative and very, very useful. And particularly that the charts on pages 30 and 31 illustrate the financial situation, which I think the committee is well advised to study and understand. When I look at it, the general picture that I see is that we overexpend in relation to the amount of income we get. When I look at, there's only two areas where we're making a profit. They are the Trafalgar, no, they're not the Trafalgar, the motor camp and the marina. All of the rest are being subsidised or supported by rates rather than users. And I look particularly at the Trafalgar Centre. Our budget for income is about 110,000 we've achieved. Sorry, our budget was 60,000 and we have achieved 110,000. That's great. That's certainly above budget, and I'm anticipating with all the events that have been outlined earlier in the meeting today that actually will be a much improved situation by the time we get through the busy season and near the end of this financial year. But when I look at the other side of the Trafalgar Centre, the expenditure, we've got an actual expenditure of 380,000, which is 3 times what we're actually returning in terms of revenue, and our budget is less than that. It's only 340,000. So we're certainly spending the money in that area. The other one I look at is the marina, and it's significantly above, but it's on budget for revenue, but it is, and it's well above the anticipated expenditure. So these are very revealing, and I just hope that we can, particularly with that Trafalgar Centre, that now that we've got it to the state that it is and it's very successful, we're getting the bookings. I just hope that the end of year figures are going to be a little bit better than what they are at this stage in the process.
Thank you, Councillor Barker, and I've found it extremely helpful, the quarterly reports. It gives us a bit of a feel broadly, or even a more detail of where things are at, so we can make these changes and steering the boat to ensure we're hitting the targets we want at the end of the year, rather than the end of the year finding we're off the mark or doing well and we can shift things around. Your point about Trafalgar Centre, Trafalgar Park, for operating, I believe that's actually operating in surplus, so it's paying for itself. I've got that right. And the operating costs. Is Trafalgar Park mentioned in these financials that come under something else?
Through the chair, that's incorporated into the sports parks.
Okay.
And that's one area where the difference is huge in terms of what we expend and what we get back and from users.
Right. But keep in mind that we're being the community-based reserves, we only expect 10% return from, or 20% return on the operating costs, so that's something part of rates in general cover when you're at fields. But Trafalgar Park is used as both high-end and community, and that's been in return on. But we don't expect the return or surplus on things like Victory Square or Una Reserves, etc. There's a cost to having those there for community use. If they're used well, are appreciated. But some good points taken there. So staff here, just on going back to earlier on, Councillor Fulton raised in regards to the Rutherford space. Just want to raise a detail here. In 4.8, we talked about the Rutherford Park Playground. And if I got that right on page 43, the Rutherford Play Space, that's one and the same.
Yes, that's correct.
And there's just a bit of an alignment here, or maybe it's an error. We've got commentary there, and it comes to a total of 1.1 million. And my recall is that we put it as a council 600k aside for Rutherford Park, and so I'm seeing it's raised to 1.1, but then also when I go to LTP, long-term plan, on page 136, when I add it up for the Rutherford Playground, it's risen to 1.4 million set aside in long-term plan. So when I first saw that a little while back, I thought there must be an error, or it's inclusive of some other infrastructure. I'm trying to see how we've got to that.
Toilet.
I'm not sure.
Through the chair, sorry, I think we have to come back to you do some work on that and come back to you with some better information.
That'd be good, because when it's been raised, when I'd seen that, and a couple of councillors raised that, I recall that we, like I said, 600k, and we debated about community dollar for dollar, and we increased it to 600k, but I don't recall us.
So I have an answer.
Thank you, that'd be great.
So the total spread over 18-19 to 23-24 is 1.1 million.
Yeah.
But that assumes an income of $400,000. So effectively it's 700,000 of council money, $400,000 worth of contribution. There is a balancing item of income. But if we're spending the money, we always show everything we're going to spend.
Okay.
So it was discussed at the council workshops in December on the basis of a business case. The workshops in January, February, the draft LTP showed a budget figure of 1.04 million, and they were rounded and uninflated at that stage. So I think that once you take 1.04 million and add CPI, particularly with the expenditure being in years, so 1 and 2 were investigation, that's 18-19 and 19-20 of 20,000 each year. And then the actual expenditure was roughly $250,000 a year for years 3, 4, 5 and 6. And once you add CPI to that, that adds 100,000 in. So no, we actually put in exactly what was expected. Which was 600.
Correct.
Plus 400 of contribution. But once you add CPI, that 600 turns into 700. So no, we've done exactly what the council agreed to.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. I'll probably a bit more discussion on that, because I think we were the council, but correct me.
I'm aware that
with
you...
600 we spoke, and then it's increased to 1.2, 1.1 contributions, but I thought the 600 was part of contributions. But then it inflates to 1.4. So it just concerns me that at the end of the day, we're in the long-term plan, we're having to find 1.4 when we're bumping up against the rates cap, when the intent around the table seemed to be 600 or 1.1 or 1 million, and it raises an expectation. Or
I'm aware that there's you and Councillor Walker and Councillor Noonan are concerned about this, and I'm actually reading from an email that I'm about to send to you to answer your questions.
Thank you for that. So that would be good to follow up on that. I appreciate the answers there.
Mr. Chair, that's part of what we're currently looking at as part of our investigation as to what are we likely to get from the community for sponsorship towards this project.
Okay, thank you for that. So there was two items there. It's that we've got 600 or 1 million, which we'll discuss a bit further, but also then it highlights that these things can grow through CPI or inflation, you say, so by the time you get to year 3, year 4, year 5, the budget has been pushed. Thank you. Madam Mayor.
Mr. Chair, I just want just so we're absolutely clear on what this is, because I just heard you saying numbers like 1.4, and I'm not looking at 1.4 in here. What I'm saying is, I just want the Chief Executive just to re-clarify, it's already clarified once, but just so that we're very clear, that the project, total cost of the project includes an assumption around achieving some sponsorship. And that, so my understanding of this particular project is that has always been the objective, is that it was going to be seen as a partnering project.
Correct.
To try and achieve some sponsorship around that. That was critical to being able to proceed with this project, and that the officers had looked at some potential costs around significant playgrounds, that this is by no means at the top end of what playgrounds cost, and we certainly know that can be up to sort of $3 to $4 million to make a significant playground. We've seen some of those constructed around the country, so I think that's pretty much stayed as intended and discussed, and it's just the acknowledgement that when we look at these figures, and I think that's something for future reports that would be very helpful, is a suggestion for these quarterly reports, is that where the budget is assuming external funding, I think it would be helpful if that could be highlighted. So because otherwise you look at it and you think, oh, that isn't the number I remember. But of course the numbers we're discussing are the numbers of ratepayer contributions, so I think that would be useful to have that in. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The 1.4 figure I'm quoting is from when it's extrapolated into the LTP document on page 136 and 137. It adds up by the time you get to year 5, it adds up, the total is 1.4 million. So coming across from here, we've got 136, 137 as you add up, you've got year 2021, 260k, year 21, 22, another 260, then 270, then 280.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I'd like to actually, maybe before the end of the meeting, someone could just clarify why, because I would have expected that the LTP figure, I'm just on what I would be missing, the LTP figure should be what's reflected in this quarterly report. So if we've got some inconsistency between the two, we just need to understand what is the variable that we've got missing.
Cheers, I appreciate, and that's what's one of the positives of having these quarterly reports. We can clarify or make sure if there isn't been a misunderstanding or an error or a correction. Going ahead. Thank you for that. So I'll be able to take note of that, which I see that, and I appreciate your email coming. Yeah, definitely. Any more questions? So push on. That's Councillor Fulton, Councillor Courtney.
Look, I just wanted to comment briefly on the Rutherford Park play space, as we are calling it at the moment. I understand that the budget for it is significant, but as the Mayor pointed out, it's significantly less than many other destination playgrounds around the country or around the world. And I just want to remind ourselves that as our city does not have a play space at this point in time, and that we've been waiting since I was elected to council, so at least 10 years, to see this project come to fruition. And I think it's a very exciting thing in terms of CBD enhancement, and I'm really looking forward to seeing this come through at the next stage. And I do think that this is an important spend to be making. And I know that there's the Rutherford concept, and I really like that. And hopefully what we see is something which is really keeping in touch with our Maito Boulevard. And we've also invested significantly in that area already. So we want to increase the use, and hopefully it engages more with our community and people use that space and utilise that space more and more. I think that we've got the Trafalgar Centre and the Northern Extension happening as well. So for me, it's quite exciting to see that whole Rutherford Park plan, which we began work on before I started on council, so over probably 9 years ago, to see that coming to fruition and see that part of our city actually be fully developed. So I'm really looking forward to seeing even preliminary plans and hearing what staff ideas are on that.
Thank you, Councillor Courtney, was it again?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Rosie. I just want to get clear in my mind here. I'm looking at 5.2 on page 30, it says the Trafalgar Centre has collected 55,000 extra rent revenue and budgeted in the Q1. In the first quarter of the year, nearly half of the annual budget has been achieved. But then I go over and I get a real wake-up call. I go over to 5.10 on page 32, and it says the Trafalgar Centre is 50,000 ahead of budget for events and venue hire and maintenance costs, which offsets the extra rent. So in actual fact, when you look at 5.2 on page 30 and you go over to page 32 and you see that we've really only received an extra 5,000 because it's been soaked up in revenue, rentals, because it's been soaked up in maintenance and other costs. Is that correct?
Through the chair, yes, that's correct.
Thank you, that's cleared my mind on that. And the other question through you, Mr Chair, is what sort of costs would that money have been spent on? Where would that have been spent? Because that's quite a large amount in 3 months, 50,000. I don't have to know now. I can get that on notice. I don't mind at all. That's fine. I'll leave
Through the
that
chair,
there.
I think it's probably better that I come back with a good breakdown of
Yeah.
what those expenses are for you.
That's fine. No worry.
Thank you for that, Madam Mayor. Apologies here when my calculating the LTP book when I'm going across the spine. Perhaps correct me, it's actually totals 1.1, not 1.4 when I go across the tables there. So it does tally up with what's in the report, the quarterly report, 1.1. There's just also clarification on that 600k that I've taken account between that community dollar for dollar.
I will send the email out.
Thank you. Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Just through you to Andrew. Andrew, you just talked before around, in relation to questions from Councillor Courtney, I think, the water sports building at the marina. And I'm just reading the commentary with this one, and I can see that it says the budget was reduced by 540,000 to reflect the planned spend for 18-19 financial year, but this funding will need to be reinstated over the next several years. So we haven't lost it. I just want to make sure I've got this right. We haven't lost it. It's just, as you've said in the report, that we're going to need to, it's included in the carry forward report. So I'm assuming that it was included because I think we've signed that, I think the carry forwards were signed out at the last council meeting. So I'm presuming that number was in there and it's moved through, it's ready, and then it'll be timetabled to drop in to the appropriate year once we get to completing design stages.
Yes, Madam Mayor, that's correct.
Okay, that's excellent. And just in terms of the, and I really appreciated, Mr Chair, just through you to Andrew, I really appreciated the user groups who have been working on this and the way they've been working so constructively and coming in with that early advice that they felt that they, in terms of where they wanted to head, so that we've got time to plan on that. Just a bit of an update, everything's still working well from your perspective?
Yes, that project's going very well, and it is largely because of the cooperation that we're getting from the user groups, and they're representing a lot of kids in the community, and it's a great project, but I just needed to signal to council that it could cost considerably more than what we first anticipated.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Any other questions to that? No, thank you. So, Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. I just want to take the opportunity to say well done to the team. I got a notification in my mail which offered me the opportunity to get a concession on playing golf at the Maitai Golf Club. I've been looking for several years to see a little bit more promotion of our facilities. That was a great one, and it's going to actually get me to get out there and get another game of golf, because I think it was a very good little promotion. Great to see our facilities getting promoted more by our promotions people.
I concur. Thank you, Councillor Barker. Can I have someone put the motion that we received? So we've got Councillor McGurk, Councillor Courtney. I don't believe there's any debate, is there any? I put it. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? Carried. Thank you. Thank you, staff, for that, and thank you for the detail you've put into that. Our next item on the agenda is the Hawlish Islands Manuka-Motu Wharf review. So as on pages 50 to 56, and I'm sure you're aware of that. Thank you. Any changes or corrections in what we've got here, or any additions to what we've got in front of us?
Through you, the Chair, no, there's no changes. It's the recommendations as it was written.
Thank you. Take it as read. Is there any questions from the councillors? Thank you. Any debate?
Yeah.
So still taking questions here. Far away, councillor.
So my question is, in terms of the full wharf refurbishment, how come, has that come up in terms of putting it into our long-term plan before now? I just don't recall considering it.
Through the Chair, no.
And why is that?
We completed condition assessments for an engineer's report, and collecting all that information and making decisions didn't time in with the long-term plan at the time.
Okay.
Even.
Yeah, I've just got a subsequent question. I guess I'm just curious to tease that out a little bit, because when it was closed, I guess visually it looks like it's quite an important island for our city, and visually, to me, it's not a great look when you go and visit there and you see this wharf, which is looking pretty run down and not in great shape, and now it's closed. And I'm just curious, like, should we have been looking at this 10 years ago in terms of renewals or keeping it up to standard at an earlier date, so that it is a place which people can... In my mind, it should never have ended up closed. So how did we end up in that situation where it... Wasn't it the Kaikoura earthquake? Was that what... Okay.
Just to drive across the table, just put the question. So the question there is, how has it come to that state? And B was a comment that was the earthquake, so I'll let you answer that.
Yeah, through you, the Chair, that's a fair question, I believe. We have put some emphasis on doing structural inspections on all bridges, not just the structure we're talking about now. And we're introduced the sort of the NZTA model for doing the assessment. So it's having a structural engineer do the assessment every 6 years, and then a qualified inspector doing the assessment every 2 years, and then every year a check by a suitably appropriate person. So that's quite a large body of work for council to undertake, and it's a new system, and it is actually quite expensive for us. So we've had to put that into the long-term plan, which we've just approved, and that's where we're trying to focus it now. So yeah, fair enough. It was probably one of those structures too. It didn't really fall into a high priority area for us. We're looking at bridges around some of the front country here, through the parks like Queen's Garden, and yes, and then the earthquake assessment. After the earthquake, we thought we'd better take a closer look at this.
Thank you. I think that's a helpful answer, and it's good to know that we've sort of got checks in place now into the future in terms of looking after our infrastructure, and I can appreciate that this is perhaps might not be that it's not on our priority list, but it's more perhaps slipped through the cracks a little bit. It's not necessarily being captured in some of the general works that you might be otherwise doing. So that's a great answer. Thank you for clarifying.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Well, thank you, Mr Chair. Through you to Jock. Jock, sorry, I just need to just follow up from Councillor Fulton's questions. Apologies if I've missed this. So, does this jetty wharf, interesting, I'm not sure whether it's a jetty or a wharf, is it in an activity or asset management plan? Is it, because I'm kind of looking at, is it a Nelson City Council asset? Presume it is, that's why it's here today. Is it in an asset or activity management plan?
Yeah, we've identified it as a council asset, and yeah.
Which one's it in?
Through the Chair, can you just explain exactly, what do you mean by, is it in the activity management plan?
Well, normally in terms of for this committee, in their asset and activity management plans, they'll deal with both the land and the structures and buildings that they have responsibility for. And what I'm interested in is whether this one is in one of those plans, because Councillor Fulton's saying she doesn't recall having discussion about this previously, so I'm just trying to work out where it might be. And to be honest, I can't recall it either, but I'm just for future reference, where is it?
So I can confirm that it is an asset of the council's, and that, it's in our database as our asset. The assumption is that it falls in as a recreational asset. It was originally built by the port company to service the island and build the groin. We understand, but that's the only records we've got of it. So it's probably one of those assets that's transferred into council's ownership through recreational use.
All right, so through you, Mr. Chair, so at the moment, Jock, you couldn't identify it in one of those plans. Is it listed somewhere with a little descriptor around it and a condition assessment?
No.
No, right, okay, so that explains why Councillor Fulton is sitting here going, funnily enough, I don't recall we've ever had a discussion around that, because that's the mechanism by which something will come to this committee, so the committees will deal with something. So if it's not in those plans, then they assume that anything that they've got responsibility for, and clearly they do, because it's here today in front of the committee, will have gone through a process so that they can have some input. So I'm just trying to understand why it hadn't reached the attention of this committee, and now I understand it because they weren't aware that they had any obligations in relation to these assets to have oversight of them, so that's helpful. Just in terms of the background, and obviously that's something Mr. Ball will have to remedy, in terms of the background, and I can see that this, there was some work that was commenced or intended to commence in relation to removing the wharf. Did that require a resource consent?
Through you, the chair, to remove the wharf, no, we don't believe it didn't require a resource consent to move it, and it's just an asset.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillor Courtney.
Mr Chair, through to Jock, I just wonder how much expenditure what we've spent on that over the years. That would be an interesting figure to look at. How well has it been maintained? Because all of a sudden it's an estate where it has to be closed. And it appears from reading the documents that you've provided us with that it's just decayed to a point, age really, more than, a storm or anything like that. So is that correct understanding?
Through you, the chair, my understanding is that not a lot of maintenance has been done on the wharf, probably because of the complexity of trying to maintain a structure like that and the cost of doing it as well, and the demand for it as well. So, it's designed primarily to service large vehicles to get it onto the island, and as a recreational asset, it's just been maintained at a minimal standard, judging from what we can see here.
Thank you for that, Jock. That was an honest answer, a very honest answer. I don't expect anything less than that from you anyway, but you mentioned that it was not of importance, not of a high priority. Can I say that's from a council officer's point of view or the council administration, but from the public's point of view, it is actually very important. It is. Always has been. It's part of the, what could I say? It's part of the landscape. It really is. An important part of the landscape, part of the picture, part of the artwork. And I am a little frustrated that it's going to be in the long, we're going to consider a full refurbishment or replacement in the long-term plan of 2021 or 2031. It's too far out. I think I would like to see it brought forward. Is there any possibility of that?
Through you, the chair, I suppose I agree with you, and that's what we found when we did the consultation, and I sat there waiting for the opportunity to talk about it. I noticed it is on the mural up there as well, so it is a part of our landscape, and that's what we're kind of recognising through this report. In terms of bringing it forward, I suppose that's a council decision. Internally, I know that we've got plenty of projects on the go already. In terms of user numbers, we think that there's other areas we should focus on. And this recommendation was a way to, keep the asset in place and sort of defer that decision.
Right. Well, we've got to do it sooner rather than later, because as I walked down the street today, I asked 3 different people, and it had to remain, and they reminisced about jumping off there as children, all the rest of it, and throwing a line off there, and the happy times they had. And that was 3 out of 3. It's not a big number, but 83% of your people, when you consulted, 83% said they wanted it to remain, didn't they?
Very good, Chair, that's correct, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Look, I actually concur with Councillor Courtney in terms of the value of Hulashore Island and as a recreational and amenity asset for Nelson. I think there is quite a bit of thinking to do. It goes beyond the wharf structure. Obviously is an immediate issue, and I think the officers have brought that a pragmatic option at this point of time. But this is an island, if we think about the whole coastal environment, the heritage, the history, the importance to iwi, then I think we need to just think quite carefully about this, the future of this place and space. It is in the coastal environment, and anything in the coastal environment has its own set of complexity, and I'll probably just encourage the team to make absolutely sure that there aren't any consent matters that are needed for what's being proposed in here, and if there are, that their costs are being added into. I think perhaps they have been for the purposes of what's been proposed there. But look, I do think that we need to do some thinking, and I'm particularly interested in the untold stories often of the iwi stories around these beautiful parts of Whakatū. So let's see if we can do a little bit of thinking and work on that to bring forward something. It's obviously, given the feedback, people of Nelson care about their engagement. It's an amazing part of Nelson Haven, and great to see that finally it's going to appear for some input from governance members of Nelson City Council who are here on behalf of the whole community. So that's a good thing. So yeah, really good thing.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a quick question, but to allude to that, it sums up for me in page on number 2.1, the very first paragraph of summary, is that in fact the community have taken some ownership of it, which is great, and I think it may be because of the landscape feature, and I appreciate that. And that was originally back in May, it was proposed council to remove this, and it was good that the community indicated that this facility was important. So my question is, aesthetically, I know I appreciate it, probably take for granted. I've done photographed a number of weddings out on the islands, and those little structures are in the background actually add to the whole story out there, and I guess enjoy a rustic aesthetic side of it, and you certainly sort of forget the practical side of it. But my question is, and I know I've put this to the office before, but just in the council arena, is there any practical use for it? I love the aesthetics, and I'd hate to see it go, but is there a demand for, if we're leaving it there or we're looking at rebuilding it, is there a demand for it for landing on the island?
Talking with the boating community, the Dawnbrokers, they're very vocal about having access to that, to land vessels. We know that quite a few people can access the island anyway, but from a long-term perspective, I suppose, if we go to the long-term plan with this, we can consider all the options. There may be a better site for it somewhere else, or there may be other users we, need to consider into the future as well. But yeah, there's definitely a demand from the boating community of They may not use it a lot, but when they do use it, they need it.
Next question, is there an urgency? I mean, it's got the rustic and aesthetic use at the moment, but it is a safety issue, I believe, in using it. Do we need something here tomorrow, or people manage to get onto the island when they need to, say the Dawnbreak community?
In answer to that, I think we're fine to just leave it closed until we can make that decision to replace it. Aluminium vessels can land on the island. It's a convenient structure to land on. If you've got a fiberglass vessel, but no, I think we're right.
Okay, thank you. I think it comes to the end of questioning. Is there any other comments there? Can I have someone move that A, we receive a report, and B, that we move the motion in front of us? Being moved by Councillor McGurk, seconded by Councillor Barker, and we had the comment.
I support,
Everybody done, is it? Okay, it's already been done. So moving into debate.
okay, I'm in support of it. I think it's the pragmatic way to go. I note that iwi have not been consulted on the preparation of this report, which might have been helpful. But from a personal point of view, Mr. Chairman, Hawleshire Island is a great place, and I've had organised family events there several times. The little ferry is great. It's perfect. So I'm happy that the community can still enjoy that wonderful asset that we have out there in this coastal area. And I think the pragmatic approach we haven't got money in the budget for it now, so I think this is the way to go. So I support the recommendation. It does give us the opportunity to fully and properly analyse and investigate what we can do when we do this LTP.
Thank you, Councillor Barker, and I had a hand up, sorry, for Councillor Fulton.
Yes, thank you, through the chair. So I certainly support the recommendation as well. I think it's a good conversation we're having now. I think that possibly we should have been having the conversation quite some time ago. I look forward to it finding that I guess the jetty needs to find a home in some asset management plan, and look forward to having a conversation into the future. I think that as the Mayor has said, possibly having a conversation around the whole island itself and how we utilise that space for our community could be helpful. It might be worth us having a workshop on the, we've had workshops in the past sort of on the port area, but we've not ever incorporated that connection with Hawleshire Island into those conversations. And I certainly see the jetty, one of the first debates I ever came to at council was on whether there should be a sculpture at Hawleshire Island, and in many ways the jetty is the sculpture. So for you know, and if it has some heritage values. I know it's not heritage listed, but it does have some heritage value, and in terms of its ability to be utilised by fiberglass boats. It sounds like it's in a good location because it's quite deep around it, and so the potential for it to increase the use of that island and to act as a gateway to the island for the community seems positive, but also the fact that it is kind of quite iconic in terms of that piece of sculpture there. I think it's a nice human-made aspect to an area which should be mostly natural, and I do concur with the Mayor's comments around it as a natural environment, so we need to be mindful of that. So considering, I guess it's a natural environment which has been quite seriously developed in the past, and just considering the aesthetics and ensuring that it's something which we want to see. I look forward to looking at this in the future.
Thank you for that. And just before I'm Councillor Courtney, I'm going to put Youth Councillors Latai and Jacob on. I thank you for being here. I'll get a bit of a youth perspective out. I know because my kids give me a hard time when I start to reminisce a little bit and the rustic stuff, and so that's pretty cool. And they go, "Dad, that's old. What are you worrying about that for?" What's your view on the debate on this? Your view on that? You've used it, or you go out there, or you enjoy it, or think we should put something new and shiny?
I've heard stories of like my parents and stuff, and I think it does go with like the whole idea of Nelson and everything, the community aspect, and just what community has said really. I like the look of it at least.
Thank you. I'll put you on the spot as well. Jacob?
I haven't really heard much about people using it. I haven't used it myself. but I think it looks good having a wharf there and being accessible to the island.
No, very good. And just a note, you can camp out on there, on that horse line, but you've got to check with the gatekeeper here, Pat, if you want to spend a night on a tent there, but it's worth making use of that facility out there. It's one of those places you take for granted, but it's right on your doorstep. And I had a hand up. Councillor Courtney and Councillor McGurk.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I just want to say that I don't really support the recommendation here because I want to see it move along more quickly. I want to see it in a usable state sooner rather than later. I don't want, and stop me from using the phrase, you know, kicking the can down the road. I don't like that, so I won't use it. It's the first thing that came to mind. We're dragging the chain. That would be better, wouldn't it? We're dragging the chain on this one, I think. And I would like to see it brought very quickly into a usable state and then go on and plan for its restructuring, rebuilding, reciting, whatever we decide to do. But I just think we owe it to the 83% of people who were surveyed who want it to remain, and if it's going to remain, I'd like it to remain in a functional state. And then I see the people that completed the structural engineering inspection on it, and I just think, well, yes, I don't want to spend ratepayers' money on another one, but I'm tempted to say it. I won't say that either. So, no, I think we should move and do something positive about this. As I said before, and I did so like Councillor Fulton's remark about it being a sculpture in itself. I thought that was a lovely phrase. And it is a landscape to the people. They love it. And we should get it back into a usable state as quickly as possible.
Thank you. Councillor Courtney, Councillor McGurk.
Yeah, I take a slightly different view to Councillor Courtney. I think it's, and that was the reason I moved the recommendation, is that I think it's probably useful now to just have a bit of a pause and just see what the future of Horseshoe Island and the wharf plays in that future. Just to replace like with like, I think it's probably short-sighted. We need to make it safe. It's obviously got some fondness in terms of the Nelson psyche, so for that reason I think it's probably important that we make it safe and just retain it for the time being, but it needs to be considered in a much wider context what the future of Horseshoe Island is and the wharf structure and how that might facilitate future use of that particular location. So urge people to, urge members of the committee to support the recommendation and we'll go forward from there.
Thank you, Councillor McGurk. I'll just about to put it, but Madam Mayor.
Oh, thank you, Mr Chair. Look, one of the things I love about coming to this committee is the enthusiasm, and I listened to your Chair's report online, I have to say, and it was absolutely fabulous. And I like the enthusiasm for every time you find you've got a new thing, you love it and you want to do things with it, and I think that's to be commended. And so I look at these dates and I'm trying to push them, you know, closer and closer to now rather than out in the future, and then I have to ask myself, so what am I going to take out to do that? So always, what is it that I'll stop doing to allow this one to slot in? And so I think that's one of the things that the committee can look at, and if the committee felt that there was an ability to get on with this now, and that was the priority, then you'd have to drop something out. I hope what this report does is, in the consultation the office has already done, is actually get the community talking a little bit about Horseshoe, and actually we might find that we've got some members of the community that are, you know, going to take a particular interest in this. Iwi, of course, have got a particular interest, and I think that's where we start. That's very, very important, and I would have liked to have seen some commentary in this report, Jock, around Iwi views. So that's a good starting point, but let's see if we get some champions coming up in the community with an interest in this particular broader picture. But let's just also be a little bit pragmatic about the capacity issue, the rates level issue, where it's tracking, perhaps for on a very, very tight long-term plan as we sit, and a reflection on the fact that when we're operating in the coastal marine environment, and processes that we need to go through and the interaction with the Department of Conservation and others, that it's not just much as we might want to have the twinkling magic wand that just makes things appear. They tend to take a little bit of time in the planning to get them through and get them right. So let's plan this right. Let's talk. Let's engage with our community. Let's look for some champions and. Really make a difference here for the future, for something for our community, and that'll take a little bit of time, and the investment in time will be well worth it, I think.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Again, which is the intent we've got in front of us, I think, and I know it will raise the community's interest, what it already has back in May, and they'll give us further feedback. But thank you, I'll put that. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? Carried. Thank you. I think that takes us to the next and final of the public part of the agenda. We've got marina governance. Thank you, Mr. Peffram. So it's pages 57 to 62. This is regards to the governance of that. We've had, as you're aware, Marina Advisory Group have very kindly put in their times and energies, which I've greatly appreciated. So we've got the report. We've come to the next stage. We've got a report in front of us.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, Roger Gibbons, Chair of the Marina Advisory Group, apologises. He was hoping to attend today to support the paper, but he's out of town.
I'll get you to speak on his behalf because I know you're in good communication.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. The Marina Advisory Group, they just need more time to continue what they're currently doing, and they're asking that we just support them at this stage, and they'll come back to us with recommendations in the future. So the recommendation is the status quo.
Questions? Councillor McGee?
Yeah, just a quick question. Mr. Chair. Andrew, how long does the representation process go?
I would imagine it would be another year, and they'll come back with a recommendation, but I can't foresee them recommending anything significantly different. I believe that as they settle down, they'll see that they're adequately representing the boaties, and they're getting the projects that they're interested, they're getting them through to the long-term plan. Already the communication between the boaties and the council's improved hugely, and with this group, it's been very successful.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Councillor Courtney.
And through you, Mr. Chair, to Andrew, I would like to see it remain in place indefinitely. I mean, you say the outcome has been that the communication is far, far better, and I think it's involving the community. I would like to just some way entice them to stay on into the future, because the marina will grow, won't it? And it'll.
Councillors, Mr. Chair, the issue through the review that we did for the marina was to what form of governance we should have long term. Should it be a trust, or should it be should the marina be in fact be sold, etc., etc. I think that the system that we have at the moment best represents the boating community of Nelson, and I believe that this will probably continue.
I like that answer. That was good, wasn't it? They're achieving things, aren't they?
Yes, they are.
And looking here, but in doing that, they're frustrated, and they're all good people, I'm led to believe. All in their own fields, they're successful, and they're frustrated by the system, and that concerns me. They seem to be bogged down by the process. Is there any way we can sort of help them expedite what they want to do in a much more speedy fashion? Because I don't want them to walk away in frustration.
Mr. Chair, councillors, no, I don't believe so. I think that what we're doing with them at the moment is explaining our processes. We're explaining to them the council's procurement policy. They understand that they're dealing with public funds. They're not a private company, as most of them come from the private sector, where they're used to making instant decisions. They now understand that they're responsible for other people's money, and that's the process that we have to work to. Initially, they found it difficult, but I think they're coming to terms with it. They're working closely with Jock Edmondson, and I think as the projects are finished, they'll get that satisfaction, and they will understand that things can't happen immediately. We have 2 accountants on that group, and they're currently looking at a fees review, and that'll come back to council with a view to that being implemented on the 1st of July. And any projects that they put forward through the annual plan need to be adequately financed in the longer term.
Thank you, Mr. Pepperham. Thank you, Councillor Courtney. Any other questions? Can I have someone put that we receive and recommend it to council? Sorry, we've got Councillor McGurk put it and Councillor Barker seconded that. Thank you. Any debate?
Sorry, who was the second?
Sorry, Councillor Barker. We had 3 quick hands there, so it was a flash of hand. Very good. So I'll put that, but if you want to debate or add any comment, Councillor Horton?
Yeah, look, I just think that the marina has caused some issues in the past, and it's really good to know that things are running smoothly at the moment, and it's nice when some of the workload decreases for the officers. I think that it's great that things are clearly under control at the moment, so well done.
Thank you for that, and any time in the future meetings, if you'd like to come present to us, that'd be great. But I know you're keeping great contact with that, and I'll keep in contact with yourself. Same with councillors around the table. Please keep in touch if there's anything that concerns and raised on that, or add to that. That ends the business for today, but Mayor Rees.
Mr. Chair, thank you for your indulgence. Look, I just want to say I was really pleased to see this report. This started from a little germ of an idea a couple of years ago, and where I look for people that have got an interest in activities happening around the city, and make the time to write submissions and indicate that they've got some thoughts about how they could contribute. And I certainly in this case, Mr. Roger Gibbons did have that, and when I invited him to my office to say, well, hello Roger, Mr. Gibbons, how would you like to step up and chair this group and put this together? And he fortunately said yes to that, and I just think that's something for us to be mindful of, is that where we've got linkages into the community or communities of interest, it's good to go and connect with those communities of interest and people who show, are prepared to voluntarily put time into the city and give them the opportunity, because it really does pay off, and it's a great way for this committee, particularly with the amount of work that you have, which is very community focused, to really get that strong community engagement. And I know that's something that you certainly support, Mr. Chair.
Definitely. Thank you for that. I'll put that. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? Carried. That concludes the business we have today. There's no public excluded, but I'll just, you may have picked up when you're watching the Chair's report, and helping your good fight with the sunshine hours. I think this table backed me, I believe they backed me, that we're starting summer early in Nelson, so more reason for people to come to Nelson rather than the 1st of December being the meteorological summer. But as I was saying, as I was penned that, it hailed, so I'm putting myself out there after that hail, that summer from this meeting onwards in Nelson, and Nelson only.
Well, I'll just take this one. This is you're allowing me, just thank you very much. I was just actually on the way down to the meeting listening to a report on National Radio around, it's one of the New Zealand Science Challenges, and it's looking at where people, love to live, and Nelson features quite well on that. And I was just having a little look at the, I've just flicked it off to Nikki McDonald because I know she'll be very interested in that, and Mark Traguta. And it has an assessment criteria in there. It only goes up to 2013, and it's got an assessment criteria, and sunshine is one of them, and so it puts a weighting on that. And what I know is that if they were using the data for 2013, they were undercounting on our sunshine. So I suspect we would have been even higher up in the rankings in terms of great places to live.
Both quality and quantity of sunshine. Very good. Thank you, everyone, and once again, thank you for the 2 youth councillors today. Thank you, staff. Cheers. Thank you, Pat.